Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors China webinar series on market entry into China. You have joined us for part 2, day 2, where we will be looking at the 6 ways to do business in China without setting up an entity or an office. Generally, when I meet clients for the first time, their main objective going into the China market is to have well, it's more of an exploratory visit into the market. They're trying to analyze the opportunities that exist there. And as a result of that, they want to try and figure out the Chinese market with the least amount of resources, commitment, and most importantly, budget. So yesterday we were looking at the importance of market research, having data at your fingertips to really analyze the market. And today, which is probably the hottest topic of all, is understanding how to do business without having an entity. Tomorrow, we're going to be looking at rep offices and their advantages and disadvantages. And then finally, we'll be looking at setting up a business in China. Today, I'm going to be concluding with trigger points that will hopefully help you to analyze why you should be doing business without having an entity and why you should be doing business with an entity. Okay, so the trigger points will be how you then escalate and upgrade to the status of having an entity. My main aim with most people is that I hope that they do business in China first without having an entity. So, because that's truly the best way to research a market and to see how the growth and escalation in the market is. The reason why I say this is because the biggest disadvantage is that when you set up a business in China, meaning you set up a company in China, if that company all of a sudden is not useful to you any longer, it takes 2 years to liquidate that entity. Okay, so you want to be very careful in your decision-making process as to whether you can do things in China and accelerate your growth by doing it from your home office or doing it from other sister-related companies versus going straight ahead with having an entity on the ground. So before we begin today's session, again, I love that I am seeing brand new names on the attendees list today. I love that. So the whole point of these webinars is that you interact with me, okay? So the first thing is I want to know who you are. And all I want you to write in the chat box is I want you to tell me, are you a newbie? Are you a startup, or are you an experienced China hand? So newbies are generally those of you that are evaluating opportunities in China and you're trying to gain a certain level of education, or you're fishing for information basically to build up a strategy on how to transact and how to protect your business. Startups are usually those that have been established for 1 to 3 years. They've been focused on their core business and now they're kind of reflecting on the administrative functions and how to improve those from an efficiency perspective in order to accelerate growth. And then the experienced China hands. So I always have a couple of these on. And I do love it because these are also now friends of mine and colleagues and peers. Why do I have experienced China hands popping in? Well, basically because China is consistently changing, continuously changing, whether it's with regulations, laws, ways of doing business, and everyone is looking for new and fresh ideas on how to improve what they're doing in China. One of my biggest spiels is that knowledge is power, particularly in a market like China, and everyone has to maintain their knowledge level, myself included. So these are the 3 groups that I've created. I'd love for you to tell me who you are. And so Dawn's a startup. Lilia is a newbie. Kim, who's been on our webinars before, is an oldie. Great to have you back, Kim. So I love it when people come on and just interact. That's the whole purpose of this. How the webinar works. I teach, I educate, I give you tips. I will be giving you case studies. I might even ask you some questions where I will want you to interact with me, okay? You are all muted, so it's all a little bit one-sided, which is not great, but it would be great if you did interact with me. There will be a Q&A. I'm going to be staying online until all questions and comments are answered. So take this opportunity. It's 60 to 70 minutes of your time spent. If you do have questions, if you do have comments, ask them, okay? If I don't know something, I will tell you that I don't know it. But if I do know something, or I can offer clarification, or I can give you a certain tip, I would be more than happy to do that. So do interact with me. On the technical side, I don't own GoToWebinar. It is a platform that I have hired to utilize for my webinars. If I am presenting, I cannot help you, and I have no colleagues with me that can help you answer any technical questions. So you're on your own for that. If you are at home and you have low bandwidth, you might have issues with instability. If you are in countries where there are firewalls like the Middle East and China, you may have instability. Just know this presentation is being recorded. It's going to go up on our YouTube page. I will be sending you a link at the end of today with a copy of the presentation, so you can always look back at it. I know this is frustrating. People have had issues on Zoom. People have issues on GoToWebinar. I cannot control that, and I apologize for that, but I can't. So just know you will get a recording. You can always look back at it and listen in, all right? So please, please, please interact and share your comments, your stories, questions, etc. Use, and just another point, in your control panel, there's a question section and a chat section. Please use the questions section, so I'm only looking in one area when it comes to the Q&A. We are going to be covering a lot of things today. This is the agenda. It's 2 pages long, which is also why I want to get the ball rolling and hit on the content. But as I'm not using my webcam because of bandwidth issues, this just puts a face to the voice. My name's Christina Kohler-Coluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. I've been dealing with corporate services and corporate compliance work since 2003. So almost hitting on actually at the end of August will be my 17th year of doing this. I've helped over 500 international companies with their market entry strategies, their implementations of those strategies, the change of those implementations into new strategies, and also their growth and acceleration in the market. So one thing I want to highlight is that I don't only help companies that are looking to implement structures in China. I'm also helping companies, like on this topic today, to develop strategies where you can do it from your home country. Okay, so for example, transacting from your home jurisdiction with China. I'm also a creator of the China Roadmap method, which I won't be touching on today. I touched on it a little bit yesterday. If you're interested in understanding more about this roadmap, I am doing a webinar on it on August 26th. The whole point of this China Roadmap methodology is that every single company goes on a journey when they go into China. And I haven't met one single company that reflects another. Everyone has had their own individual journey, experience, obstacles. The reason why I created this methodology is because I truly believe there are 3 major milestones, from opportunities, understanding those, to implementation and to growth. And I basically nicknamed the fact that you need to achieve 9 superpowers in order to make sure you have everything thought about and encompassed within your roadmap to avoid as many obstacles as possible. So if you're interested in joining, like I said, that's the link. You'll get a copy of this. And if you want me to send you the link, I can do so. It's also on our website. So let's get cracking. And let me start off with the introduction. So whenever I meet companies in China, originally back in 2004, it was automatically, we need to have an entity in China. And it was not so much to do with actually the business functions, it was more to do with the fact that they thought it was vital for them to have an on-the-ground entity for image purposes. And I wrote it here, it's to everyone, it is sexy to have an operation in China, okay? For image, for whatever it might be. But I just want to tell everyone today, it is one option. Nobody is forcing you to have an entity in China. You can always create innovative solutions that minimize your costs in order to be able to transact with China. And that's the whole point of this topic today, is to show you what ways you can do that in to minimize the fact of actually establishing an entity that you don't actually need right now, okay? So everybody is on a tight budget, you know, regardless of COVID, everyone is always on a very tight budget. And we want to minimize that cost. In some cases, we might want to minimize the commitment and resources and how to then transact without having something on the ground, okay? So, you know, one of the things that I just want to say right now with COVID is that getting visas, and I'm here to tell you that personally because I'm a resident of Shanghai, I'm stuck in Germany. I can't get back in. I need to go through a whole new visa process, and there are certain other restrictions that apply to me with my children as well that is preventing me from going back. And it's going to be the same for any of you that are looking to expatriate individuals into China. Not an easy process. If they're single, always easier. If there are children involved, much more complicated, especially with COVID right now. Don't let this get in your way though. You can find solutions around this. And I have a lot of clients who are in the same situation as I am, where the expatriates are abroad, or even families that are split up. There are ways of solving these issues without having to go through any visa process at the moment. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. Now, let's start off with what your goals are. So if you are going into the Chinese market, okay, usually you have two sets of goals. One is you want to transact with companies in China, whether that be B2B business or B2C business. So you want to be able to transact as best as you can without having an entity on the ground. Now, if you are looking to accelerate your growth, most likely you need an individual on the ground in China to help you to accelerate that growth. Don't make the assumption that you can accelerate your growth directly from your head office. You can't. You can start off your operations from your head office, but to accelerate your growth, you will need people on the ground. And the issue then is whether you hire mainland Chinese employees or whether you hire foreign employees. Now, in order to minimize cost, I have currently quite a few clients, as well as a lot of potential inquiries saying, oh, but we already have people on the ground and no entity. Okay, for me, that's a red flag. And then I ask a lot of questions. How are you doing that? Okay, because that's actually not legal. You cannot employ a mainland Chinese individual who is residing in China from your home office that is outside of China. Freelance agreements are very gray areas, meaning it's not even in the law. So it could very well be if there's a breach of this freelance agreement, you're not going to win. Okay. What you need to know is that if you have a mainland Chinese individual on your payroll, they have to pay individual income tax in China. They have to have social insurance in China. Otherwise, they're in trouble. And when you start generating these freelance type agreements from your home office with these Chinese employees, be assured that 80% of them will most likely never declare personal income tax and never declare social insurance because they want to keep the full amount in their pocket. And if there is a breach or there's an argument or basically this marriage ends in divorce, be assured that the mainland Chinese employee has leverage over you to go to a labor arbitration committee and say, I've been hired by this company abroad. They've never paid my taxes. They never paid my social insurance. I'm owed a lot more money. What it does in the end, in worst case scenarios, it puts your company and your home jurisdiction on a blacklist. Now, I don't want, because I've gone through this myself, I don't want any company that's entering into the Chinese market to have to spend time with these issues, because all it does is that it deters you from focusing on what is the most important, which is growth, transactions, sales, whatever you're planning on doing in the market. Okay, you don't want to be distracted by these things. And it's vital that you don't become distracted. Okay? It's the same when you're hiring foreign employees. Don't make an assumption that foreign employees can go to China, be actually permanently located there, not have a residence visa, not have a work permit, but travel in and out every 30 days. That's wrong. Okay? If they are residing in a calendar year more than 180 days, that foreign employee has to pay taxes in China. And they should be employed by an entity then in China. So although it might cost you a little bit more, you need to work with an intermediary firm to hire these people properly with employment contracts that are local in order to pay salaries, income tax, social insurance locally. Okay? Think about the cost of doing it properly against the cost of to your business of spending time if there are legal issues that are arising and you have to pay more capital out of your budget for China than is necessary. So do it right. The next is probably if you are looking to sell into China, and the names that are familiar to me in the attendees list, generally you're all looking to sell into China. So if you are looking to sell into China, then another issue that you might find or that might be raised is the fact that you have to issue FOPYAOs. FOPYAOs, this is a picture of a FOPYAO right here. It's printed and purchased from the tax bureaus. And this is how companies get their VAT, value-added tax deductions. So you may find that when you are bidding for a project in China, that companies, customers want to receive a FOPYAO invoice. Only Chinese registered companies can issue these types of FOPYAOs. You cannot do this from your home jurisdiction. So in order not to lose a bid, you can use an intermediary. If you are trading with China, you can use an import-export agent to help you to issue those FOPYAOs. If you're using an import-export agent solely handles paperwork. They are not a distributor, they're not a sales agent. They are an import-export agent. They will probably charge 1% of the sales value, okay, roughly. But again, it's an intermediary that you're using to issue these FOPYAOs. If you are providing services into China and your customer in China is looking to get a FOPYAO, you can use intermediary invoicing agents that can issue these service FOPYAOs to your clients. Okay, so from my perspective, these are usually the two main goals that people are trying to achieve at some point in China. One is the FOPYAO issue, and the other is hiring someone locally to work on their behalf. Now, let's look at the 6 ways of doing business in China without actually having an entity in China. The first is doing direct sales. So I have a lot of clients who continue to do this because of the high value of their products. So for example, you'll have a US, UK, German, Australian company that is producing locally high value machinery, equipment, whatever it might be, and they're selling it directly to customers in China. So that's more B2B business, okay? Or you have suppliers in Europe that are looking to do e-commerce, and they are going to be creating cross-border e-commerce channels to sell direct, okay? Or you can have e-commerce through your own websites that you are creating in China. There are slight complications around that, though. In any of these direct sales modules, you still need intermediaries to help you, okay? Even though you're doing it direct, you either need a logistics provider, an import-export agent to issue FOPYAOs, you need to have warehousing facilities, you might need to have an e-commerce platform where to post your or create your shop. With the website, you might need to have a company who owns the .cn of that website or that mobile app, etc. You still need an intermediary to help you with this, not to mention how to market whatever you're selling. okay? You probably still need salespeople either in your home office or locally in China to promote your products, your services, and get the ball rolling so that you do get deals. If you're doing e-commerce, you certainly need to do branding in order to get your product and your brand known in the market. So you still have to have intermediaries in place to help you, although the transaction is going direct, okay? Option number 2 is having sales representatives or sales agents, okay? Now, the one thing that I want to highlight between the difference of sales agents and sales agents and distributors is the fact that a sales agent usually takes on less liability than a distributor would. So sales agents usually work on a percentage of what they sell. They may even ask for a marketing stipend to offset certain costs for developing the business, but they won't purchase inventory. And generally, for me, distributors will purchase inventory, hold that inventory under their name, they'll act as the consignee, they'll take on that risk, and then they'll sell. Sales agents work on basically a commission basis, okay? Now, one thing about sales agents and sales representatives is that you have to do a background check on them. Are they experienced with your product or your service? What is their reputation in their market regarding your product and your services? Okay. Do they have the network, ecosystem, connections to develop your business? Okay. What is their customer base? Do you have a list of who their existing customers are, and are they applicable to you for your product and your services? You do need to do a certain background check on them to make sure it is the right fit. Now, I will say this throughout today's presentation, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And what I mean by that is don't work with one sales agent, don't work with one distributor, don't work with one licensee, don't work with, franchising a slightly different model, but try to spread your wings that you're using a multitude of providers, because China is enormous. Generally speaking, one sales agent or one distributor cannot cater to the entire Chinese market. Impossible. So you might want to spread your wings a little bit and have, for example, an agent in the north, an agent in the Shanghai area, an agent in the south, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, an agent in the west, Chengdu or Chongqing, okay? So don't put all your eggs in one basket. In addition to that, and this is again something where a lot of my clients don't have this vision, is everyone is focused on the short term, solving short-term problems. You got to think long-term. So what I want to put in your mind is, if you are working with a sales agent or a sales rep, and you're working, for example, with a company and they have many sales agents and sales reps, and you've been appointed with one, is the relationship you're developing with that individual becoming trustworthy, loyal, to the point where you could headhunt them out so that they could work permanently for you versus working with a multitude of clients? That's the long-term vision you should have, because I have not met one single company that has not started with this type of model of doing things directly from their head office, growing, accelerating that growth, and eventually setting up an office so that they can become independent. And then they're looking for people. This is your first avenue of people that you could potentially hire on board, okay? So do think about that long-term vision as well. The next is using a professional employment organization, okay? Now, what this basically means is that you could potentially go through a recruitment process yourself to find somebody who acts as a sales rep or a sales agent is not the right word, but for example, your sales manager. So ideally, this person is working 100% full-time on you, and they are being hired by an intermediary, a professional employment organization, so that their whole employment aspect, from contract, handbook, social insurance, individual income tax, is being paid properly and declared properly from day one. The advantage of the professional employment organization is the fact that they are simply an intermediary. They're not getting involved actually in the running of your business. All they're doing is basically they're a payroll agent. They're hiring the individual on your behalf, and this individual is going to be working full-time for you. Okay? But the advantage is that you have somebody on the ground who is 100% working for you, is dedicated to you, can give you feedback on a daily basis, and is basically doing market research. Now, I mentioned a case study yesterday where I had a client who utilized this method. So we hired the individual on their behalf, and we contracted with them for 2 years. The outcome of after that 2-year period was basically that they terminated our service and they terminated the employee because they found that the volume of business was not there to warrant this type of structure. And they realized that they were too early in the market for what they were selling. And they have now a strategy to come back in about 5 years' time to reevaluate what is happening. It was a great first step for them, because what I want to also mention is there's sometimes not a rosy picture coming out of this phase. Sometimes you might find that it's too early to go into the Chinese market for your specific product or service, that there isn't this potential and opportunity there, which means you've got to backtrack a little bit, save cost for a while, and come in maybe, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later. Okay? Now, hopefully we all aim that there is positivity that comes out and success, but it doesn't always happen. Okay? So this is a great intermediary option for you. Option number 4 is utilizing distributors, and this is probably what most people are looking to go into, particularly if you're selling products in the market. Now, distributors usually take on a much higher liability and risk because they actually take on liability of your products, and they handle the whole supply chain around your product. Everything from handling BD, marketing, purchasing of the goods, logistics, warehouse, and bringing it out to the customers. Okay, so there is, they're taking a larger piece of the pie basically in terms of the whole supply chain. So they are taking on more risk. Now, again, similar to sales agents and sales reps with distributors, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Okay, you've got to find more than one. One thing that I definitely would recommend is make sure you don't sign any form of exclusivity with distributors. Okay, you want to have very flexible exit clauses. Now, I want to give you here an example. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So the first is a company that actually had a Asian regional head office in Hong Kong, and they were looking to go into the Chinese market. They were looking to go through a distributor who, as an additional function, was going to open up retail stores for them as well. And this head of this Asia regional office is actually a personal friend of mine. So she called me for my advice simply, and she said to me, Christina, I just want to brainstorm with you a little bit because I'm in discussion with a distributor. He's got a great background. He's got a great customer list as references. We get the impression he knows exactly what he's doing. He's created a strategy that we agree with. There are 2 issues we have with him. One is he wants to sign exclusivity, which we're nervous about. And the second one is that he won't give us any transparency with the selling price at the points of sales, so in the retail stores. And he's not going to really give us transparency on the margins that he's going to be earning. And so, it's not that I want to be a coach or a therapist, but in the end of the day, I said, well, the exclusivity is a negotiation point that you've got to decide if that's a pro and con for you. I consider it as a con because you want to have flexibility to exit that agreement and move on to other distributors. I said the second point for me, this is more serious. Because if you've got a long-term vision of the market, and at some point, and I don't mean tomorrow, but I mean maybe in 5 or 10 years, you as a brand want to go independent in China and do things by yourself and set up a head office and own those retail stores yourself and expand into tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, you want to have transparency. Because if you don't have that, there's no way you're going to be able to go independent successfully. So for me, the transparency that you earn from your distributors, that's key. Because you won't know then the full supply chain that is occurring from the point of delivery to the distributor to the point of sale to a customer. And that for me, again, is something that is extremely important. And then I started asking questions. How much transparency do you have over marketing? What type of marketing are they going to be doing? Now, this is way back in the day when e-commerce was just kicking off. So e-commerce wasn't a big attraction for them at that point, but it was going to be eventually. So you've got to be aware when you're negotiating with these distributors and you're negotiating your contracts, create a bullet point list. What is vital for you? Okay, first of all, it should be your brand. Have you trademarked it? Don't let the distributors trademark that. You want a full ownership, okay? Then how important is it for you to know what marketing they're doing? Maybe it's not, right? You've got to make that evaluation yourself, okay? I could tell from the phone call that transparency was really bothering her. Plus then add on the exclusivity, it really worried her. And I said, you've got to go back to the negotiation table. Now, this leads me to another point. When you're going into negotiations, whether it's with sales agents, sales reps, distributors, licensees, please use a lawyer in China to help you do these negotiations, okay? Again, thousands of lawyers, millions of lawyers that are in China that you can hire, that speak fluent English, that can help you with these negotiations. All right, please don't use a UK lawyer or an American lawyer who knows nothing about China. It makes no sense, okay? Please pay for a Chinese lawyer based in China to help when you're going into distributor agreements, thinking about exit clauses, and hopefully these lawyers will also make you evaluate what you consider as priority aspects regarding those agreements. So biggest tip I can highlight here, please try to use these lawyers. Now, another thing that I want to highlight, which is another case study, was a client of mine new to the market, having signed only with one distributor, no exclusivity. It's just she signed already with one distributor and she was looking for other distributors in other markets. This distributor was based in Shanghai, selling a food product and selling it to the various supermarkets and other retail chains, food-related retail chains, and hopefully also getting into the restaurant market. Now, her distribution agreement, I was so surprised when she was telling me about it because inside there were also KPIs, which I thought was brilliant. So this distributor had a time frame and KPIs to reach a certain volume and value of business. And she said to me, he's not achieving those KPIs as is agreed in the distribution agreement. And I said, well, have you flown over? Okay, now with COVID, nobody can fly over. This was prior to COVID. And I said, have you actually flown over, met with them face to face and understood what problems they're experiencing? So the first perspective of most people is that they will say, he's just not doing it. He's not doing his job. Nobody assumes that maybe the distributor has a certain list of problems that he's experiencing because, and that's related to then the fact that there is less or fewer sales, okay? So communication with any of these people is vital, all right? Zoom works in China. GoToMeeting works in China. WeChat works in China. Having that level of communication to understand if the distributor is not meeting certain expectations, why is he not reaching them? Please don't make the assumption they're lazy, because generally it's not because they're lazy, okay? For them, their advantage would be if volumes and values increase tremendously. They'd get more business and more money. So they must be experiencing some form of issues where you need to discuss together the solutions. You have to also help. Don't have a distributor and forget about them, and in 6 months say, why haven't you achieved your goals? Have consistent communication with them. Now, some of this might all seem very like common sense, but I hear excuses like China's too far, time zone issues, I never have a chance to communicate, da 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 da. You don't have an option to get on a plane right now. So communicate through other modes of WeChat, Zoom, and do it weekly. Get in touch with people so you understand what's going on. And you'll find out that you might discover that there are new sales channels that you haven't explored. They're not in your distribution agreement, so he's avoided them. Make also the assumption that people in China are reactive, not proactive. I'm generalizing here, but that's sometimes the case, which means that you as a supplier trying to build up your business in China, or you as a company trying to build up your business and accelerate your growth in China, you have to be proactive. You have to make those phone calls. You have to ask for data. Otherwise, there's no way for you to accelerate and grow. And yes, it requires time and it requires resources. But if you don't have that available at your fingertips, you're not going to get any further. Now, option number 5 is licensing. And for some reason, I'm having a lot of companies going into licensing in 2020. I'm not sure why. That's why I've added it in here. So you can license your product. You can license your name, your brand, your program, your design, your technology. Now, typically with licensing, it means that you generally have much less control over what the other company is doing. But this is where, if you want to gain a little bit of control, you should have a licensing agreement in place, drawn up by a Chinese lawyer who works on your behalf to negotiate it, okay? But licensing is a way for you to get into a market with really the least amount of resources, as long as it is a right partner for you. And again, there are a variety of different licensing partners that you can collaborate with, depending on whether you have a product, whether you have a design, whether you have a technology, etc. But this is another beautiful option for you to utilize. Now, again, very similar to sales agents, to any intermediary partners that you're collaborating with, do your due diligence on them to make sure they are the right partner for you. And again, get a lawyer involved to help you to negotiate those contracts. Franchising is the last option. It's option number 6. So I've gone through the 6 ways. This will be the final way for you to do business without having an entity on the ground. It's utilizing these intermediaries. And everybody knows what franchising means, or at least I hope you do. Basically, you're franchising your brand, your products, your services, and it allows companies in China to buy into existing and successful businesses. But here you have already the guidelines or operational guidelines for being provided by you by the overseas brand in terms of marketing, operations, etc. And again, a lot less control over this, where you will have to probably spend a little bit of time to make sure that the franchising operation does not, how do I say that, does not make your brand name go bad. There's a word for this, I'm sorry. So, you know, you want to make sure that they maintain the level of image and success that you've built up over the years in other jurisdictions, and that is maintained in China and it doesn't fall below par, okay? So there is some form of control that you should be doing to make sure that that doesn't happen. So guys, these are the 6 ways to do business on the ground. Now, I haven't finished the presentation because I'm now starting on the most important part. As I highlighted initially when I was explaining to you the goals that you should be having for China, and I was saying you need to hire someone or you need to have an intermediary issuing FAPIAOs. And when I was explaining the first methodology, which is doing direct, you still need to work with intermediaries. There is no way you can go into the Chinese market without having the help of intermediaries. And there's a variety of intermediaries that I'm referring to. These are lawyers, corporate service providers, marketing agents, PR organizations, logistics providers, warehousing providers. If you're going to e-commerce, you're looking at e-commerce platforms. You are, I mean, basically the list goes on. right? You need to be working and contracting with intermediaries on the market. But you've got to be aware of the partners that you're collaborating with. And this is where a lot of people fall short. So just so you know, everyone can pay for a background check of an individual or of a company in China, okay? We offer that service, but there are also hundreds of other companies out there or law firms out there who can do this type of due diligence. Cost is really minimal. You're talking maybe a couple thousand renminbi per company or per individual. But if that's an issue in terms of cost, I want to provide you with tips today on how you can do it by yourself, okay? Without having to hop on a plane and fly over and meet people face to face. So why do you conduct due diligences? Well, first of all, scams are popular in China, just like scams are popular anywhere in the world. Okay, I just want to emphasize that because people always, the media is really portraying China in a bad light nowadays, and people who've never set foot in China are believing all of these things. Scams exist wherever you go in the world. You cannot tell me that scams don't exist in Russia, that they don't exist in South America, that they don't exist in America or in the European Union or the UK or Australia. Scams exist everywhere. And you should be doing due diligences on any partner that you work with. Okay, now the issue though in China, I feel, are the last 2 points, which is the lack of transparency with partners and the cultural language. Okay, not just the language, it's the culture and the language differences. Okay, so this is where I want to give you tips today in order for you to gain transparency and to minimize the cultural language aspect. So when you are approaching partners and you feel that the negotiations are moving further and further, either your lawyer or even you prior to engaging with a lawyer can simply ask for item number 1, which is, can I see your business license? By seeing the business license of your partner, you will first of all understand, are they a real company in China? Okay, and showing your business license, it's public information. So even if you came to me and you said, Christina, this is the Chinese name of a company, this is their address, could you check them up? I can. And within 24 hours, I can give you the background of what's in the business license. But to show good faith, you can also ask your partner for their business license. There should be no issue for them providing this, okay? So if they don't, it's a red flag. Something funny is going on. Now, if you want to go more in depth into asking for things, you can ask for certain tax certificates, which are now unified with the business license, but they might have other tax certificates. You might want to ask for their IP registrations, their trademark, copyright, patent registrations. You might want to see their lease agreement. Are they really saying that they're located in that office space? And financial documents. Now, financial documents might be a little bit tricky to go through because some companies openly will say it's confidential information. However, having said that, if it is public, if it's ticked in the government system as being public, you can also go into the government system yourself and find that information. Okay, so these are 5 items that you can ask for. Okay, and if you don't get them, you can ask a provider to try and get them for you through a background check or due diligence. Okay, but this is something that's free of charge. It's just a matter of you communicating and saying, could I take a look at it? Okay, if they don't give it to you, potentially a red flag. Then other type of research that you can do is you can do an online search yourself. Now, most of you will probably say, yeah, I've done an online search and I'm, nothing's popping up. Well, if they are a Chinese company, it might not pop up under a Google search engine. So you might want to use Bing. Bing is the equivalent of Google in China, and that's the Chinese search engine. And you may want to then use Bing, use your English keywords, but you might also then want to put their Chinese name in it and see what pops up. But this is something, again, that you can do. Just remember, use Bing, because that's the Chinese search engine where most things will be found, versus Google. You can also do other forms of online search. So, for example, don't forget that people in China use LinkedIn. Okay, LinkedIn is not blocked in China. So if you have a connection with someone you have a partner, like an individual within this agent or a distributor or whomever, search them up. Are they on LinkedIn? What does their profile say? Okay, so you can do these types of searches from your desk. You can also call their general fixed phone line. And this is something that you should also be aware of. Now with WeChat capabilities, most companies don't have general fixed phone lines. So, you know, might not necessarily be a red flag, but it doesn't hurt to give a call several times at different points in the day to see who picks up and how are they picking up. And will they transfer you to the right partner? The next is making sure your contacts are working there. Are they true representatives of the firm? Meaning, are they true employees of that company? They might not be. They themselves might be intermediaries. And you need to be able to find that out. Talk to third parties, and this requires then communication. So for example, ask your partner for a customer list. Can you talk? Do they have a couple of references? Who are their suppliers? Who are their competitors? You know, do government searches, check the media. And this you can all find out through a background check or a due diligence. So if that's important to you, that will come at a charge. But, you know, if you get a customer list, you can contact customers directly. Ask for foreign references. So for example, if you're working with a distributor who says he's only working with foreign companies, ask, can I talk to one of them? Can I talk to one of your customers? Right? I get asked all the time for references. Of course I provide them. So why don't you do it with your partners? Check their address. Now, in this situation, nobody can fly over and check their address, but potentially you can find providers, or you can ask chambers of commerce or associations to guide you with this, to do a live check of someone's office. And you'll probably have to pay someone to do that, to physically travel to that address and make sure someone is there. You can obtain the AIC file. AIC is the Administration of Industry Commerce. It's where I was saying that I can go to the Ministry of Commerce's website, type in the Chinese name, also better to have the Chinese address, and see what pops up. Okay? If something pops up, you'll find the whole content that is within the business license for sure. And if the information is public, you'll also find the financial data. And you also find out, if the company is in good standing. You can check the business license, the company CHOP of the company. You should definitely ask for the bank account information of the company. So this is where a lot of people don't always realize, and this certainly happened a lot more in the past, where you would be transacting with a company, contract would be with a company, but when you would get the invoice, the account information is actually an individual versus a company. So that's, again, for me, a red flag, right? If a contract is with a company, the bank account should be with the company. Everything should be matching. So, you know, definitely ask for bank account details. And then if you have the ability, check the financial data. If they give it to you, like for example, audit reports are a good first start, because audit reports have to be filed with the government. So that's something that you can also start off and ask for. Okay, but a lot of these things are things you can do at your desk, and it's just a matter of communicating with the people to ask for this information. Now, for me, these are signs of suspicion. So if you are transacting, or if you are negotiating and discussing with somebody in China, and you're like, this is so easy. My goodness me, everyone has told me to beware of so many different things. If it's too easy, it's a red flag. Okay, nothing in China is easy. I'm telling you today, and I'm going to repeat it. Nothing in China is so easy. If a negotiation is so smooth, I consider it a red flag and do more investigation before you sign off on anything. Okay, you want to be thorough with this. If they only have a website in English, it's also a red flag. So most of you, if you go to my website, it's only in English. I don't have a Chinese website. The reason I don't have a Chinese website, though, is my clients are all foreign investors coming into China. My site should only be in English. I don't cater to mainland Chinese companies. That's not my service. That's not my target market, sorry. So I have a valid reason for why my website is only in English. But if you are working with a distributor who is selling into the Chinese market and their website is only in English, my question would be, why is it only in English? And Why is there no Chinese one? And is it real? Okay. The third one, and I have a couple of Chinese people here on here today. I mean, no offense, but this is something that I've learned. Westerners have a lack of patience. Pure and simple. When we want to go in China, we are so excited for the opportunities. In our mind, it's like we've got to push, 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 push. We've got to speed up the process. We should have been there yesterday. And we have a lack of patience in terms of moving everything forward. The Chinese know this, and they love to play on the patience of Westerners. And they will push, 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 push until a contract is signed without you having been thorough with your investigation on their background. So be aware of this. Take your time. All I can say is, yes, it is exciting to go into China. It is amazing. It is a journey. But there have been too many companies that have not done their thorough investigation because they've been in such a rush that they said, oh, we don't need it. We've had so many dinners with these guys. We trust them. How can you trust them? You've only met them a few times or spoken to them a few times. So make sure you do things thoroughly, okay? If there's no verifiable track record, no company email address, and pure and simple, use your gut. If something doesn't add up and your gut is telling you this sounds really weird and funny, ask someone in your ecosystem, in your network, you know, is this correct? Is this how it really works in China? Because I can tell you now, the saying, oh, that's China, it doesn't exist anymore. Okay, China is at a level now where it's you know, it's almost at a Western standard, I want to say. So if someone is telling you about doing a transaction where you normally don't do it in that methodology, use your gut instinct and ask someone to say, does this sound normal to you? What do you think I should do? Okay, brainstorm with people. This is also why I say one of the superpowers you should have is having an ecosystem of individuals or a network of individuals that can help you, guide you, brainstorm with you, give you ideas on whether something is right or not right, okay? Check always before you do something. There's no stupid question in China. You just want to be thorough and check. If they have no production facilities, no license, and also ultimately you find out there's no staff, okay, that's definitely a sign there. If they're considerably cheaper than market average price, question mark, why? Why are they cheaper? What's the reasoning? You got to do an investigation there. If your contact doesn't work for the company anymore, that's also another red flag. Where did your contact go? What happened to him? How is it going to be changed later? And now with WeChat, this becomes less and less of an issue because you'll have your contact on WeChat that if he's no longer working for a company, you can still communicate with him to find out why. And maybe you'll find out that there are internal issues. If the communication style or contact person is changing, that's also an issue. If people are asking for full upfront payments or facilitation fees, you need to have open communication with them and say why. If you're not willing to pay for a full upfront payment, ask, can we split out the fee? Okay, you've got to make sure that you are comfortable with everything in the negotiation. If they're asking a full upfront payment and you don't like that and you don't want to do that, but you really think this guy or this company has great potential, it's a negotiation point. Don't stop right there and then, right? Negotiate. It is a bit of a red flag, but negotiate and see if something can happen around it. Now, those are my tips of things that you could do at your desk, because I know everyone is in a budget, everyone is looking to cut costs down. So these are things you could do from your computer with also your phone, communicating on WeChat or communicating directly with your partners to get more transparency. Now, if there are language barriers where your partners are only speaking Chinese, don't forget that there are associations and chambers of commerce that can offer interpreters for you to help you manage those language barriers, okay? And from a cultural perspective, this is something that you guys just have to learn. You've got to be able to communicate, have open dialogue, and don't be afraid to say things, okay? It's a negotiation, okay? You're not going to burn bridges or anything like that. You're in a negotiation phase, so try things out. Now, to end today's presentation, Today we focused on 6 ways of not having an entity on the ground. What could you do or how could you transact without having an entity on the ground? And ultimately, you are replacing the entity aspect, which is entity plus people, with just intermediaries, because you still need intermediaries to help you. So one thing, again, that I'm so key on is making sure people, when they work with me right from the beginning, they have a short-term vision and they have a long-term vision, okay? And I want everyone to understand that there are certain trigger points that you should think about in order to move from using these intermediaries to doing things by yourself. So some of these trigger points can be, and I've listed 8 questions here, but there are many more you should be asking yourself. What volume of business have you already achieved through these intermediaries? What value of business have you achieved? Are you being asked to issue FAPIOs in your own company name, meaning customers don't want to work with that intermediary? That should be a red flag for you. Are you being asked for local representation? Are you being asked to have a showroom? Are you being asked to have a 100% solely working for you sales representative or sales manager? Are you being asked to stock inventory? Do you need to increase your brand image and work more on developing your brand? Do you need to have an office space, a showroom, a warehousing facility? Do you need to start marketing locally and supervise those initiatives? Okay, these are generally the trigger points that are important for people to consider when going into the Chinese market. Okay, so again, these are only 8. You've got to think about your whole business model and say, you know, how can we improve it? At what point do we have to step up and move up the ladder and upgrade? Okay, and I'll be highlighting a little bit more of this on Thursday about setting up a business. Now, what are the advantages of incorporating a structure in China that you might not get when using one of these 6 ways? So the first one is commitment to the Chinese market. So what do I mean by that? You might find that when you are bidding for certain projects, you get rejected. And you might find that at a certain time, the rejection gets continuous. Image is a very key thing in China. It's a cultural aspect. And quite frankly, by having an entity on the ground, it increases your image level and it shows the commitment that you have to the market. So if you don't have that entity, it might show that you are still in an exploratory phase and you might leave. Okay, it doesn't show stability. All right, that's one of the advantages that you might not get working with these intermediaries. Another is that it increases your brand image and profile, right? When you physically open your office in China and you've got a showroom or whatever, you know, you have your PR people highlighting you've opened your office, right? And it increases your brand image, it increases your profile that you might not get with intermediaries. You've got the ability to hire people in your own company name. Now, when I was talking about the professional employment organization and you're using intermediaries to hire people, I have a lot of clients who don't use professional employment organizations, but they use suppliers or they use distributors to hire people. So I have quite a few clients that have recruited, hired people and who are then employed by the distributor, not necessarily sitting in the distributor's office. How do you think that model is portrayed to these employees? Because quite frankly, it's a psychological thing. It doesn't provide stability to them. It doesn't provide security. And in some way, it gives a little bit of anxiety because you're being hired by an intermediary. And for them, their first thought process will be, this job sounds fantastic, but where is my career progression going to be? Because if I'm hired by an intermediary, there's no security knowing that they're going to set up an entity in China. Okay? And that's where a lot of communication has to happen with the employees to make them feel safe, make them feel secure, and give them an understanding of what your vision is, the long-term vision for your China journey. Because, you know, it's true what people say, there is a lot of turnover in China, but you can prevent that turnover nowadays by providing that security and stability. The next is ability to invoice and issue papiaos to customers, which obviously provides you transparency on price points, and it also gives you financial control, okay, and financial transparency. The last 3 points are around control. When you are working with these intermediaries, the downside is you're relinquishing a lot of control over your business, your China business to them. And that, quite frankly, makes me nervous. So when you are developing these structures with these intermediaries, what you want to make sure you're doing, and by the way, this is going to be highlighted in next month's webinar series when we talk about building your strategy. We're going to give case studies about, what are the duties and responsibilities of distributors and how to make a clear distinction of what their job is and what your job is, okay? So whenever you're creating these relationships with these intermediaries, it's really important to know what are going to be your job functions and what are you going to have control over, and what is the distributor's job functions going to be and what is his control. And ultimately, you might find that you just simply want over time to have the full control under you, which is why you would want to have your own entity. The same thing goes like the ICP license. ICP license is an internet content providing license. It means that you have your own .cn website owned by you, and you can sell through that website. If you don't have an entity in China, you can't have that ICP license. Okay, so you're going to use an intermediary to apply for it on your behalf and use their entity to utilize it. There's so many other licenses out there as well that you have to be aware of. But the same with marketing platforms. If you are selling through e-commerce platforms and you're using intermediaries or third-party providers to handle those whole functions, they have the control. They're getting the data. They're going to be issuing marketing campaigns. And what I highlighted yesterday was that one of the things that you need to evaluate, again, is do you want to outsource all these marketing functions and parts of your supply chain to other parties, or do you want to have that control in-house? And that's where you guys have to evaluate what's a priority for you and what's important for you. But these are the advantages of having your own entity and knowing that you have the control over all aspects of your supply chain. However, this should not come lightly, okay? I want you to be aware that it is perfectly fine for you to utilize intermediaries to start off your business in China. And I hope that you all do, because it's a learning lesson. Use these intermediaries as educators and teachers to show you how to transact in China, what is needed, okay? That should be your education experience in the short term, ultimately, so that eventually you learn from them and you do it on your own, all right? I have a great example that I want to end today with, which is a client of mine who was very lucky with his market entry. He found a distributor and only decided to work with him. It was purely an internal decision. It was an American individual who had his own distribution company in northern China. And my client worked with them for probably about 4, 5, 6 years, and they grew where actually this distributor had a retail store that they were managing on behalf of the client, and they were working on 3 to 4 different e-commerce platforms. And the business grew to the point where actually the distributor hired a marketing manager to purely do marketing campaigns for this client as well. Now, lo and behold, the American guy who owned the distribution company decided to go into retirement. So he gave my client 2 options. One, we transfer everything over to a new distributor, but you have to find that distributor and vet that distributor. Or number 2, which the distributor then also recommended, said, you've got enough experience in the market, why don't you go and do it alone? And honestly, it would be great if you would take this marketing manager over to you and she would run your business. And that's exactly what they did. They set up their own entity, they set up their own new retail store, and they transferred all of the e-commerce platforms over. They even got the ability to hire this marketing manager under their company to keep the continuity of the business going. And it's been going great. So this is really a success story that I want to highlight here today of utilizing that distributor as a testing run. And then eventually, okay, my client was forced into it because of the individual's retirement, but was forced into actually going and doing it on his own. So again, I wanted to end it off on a bright note of someone's success in China and how they've managed it. If you guys want to book a brainstorming session with me, please do. I'm happy to chat with you. I'm going to write in the chat box here now the link to this, the link to my diary, where you can actually set up a call with me, and I would be happy to talk to you about what you're planning on doing in the Chinese market. If you don't want to go into this diary, you can email me. I'm going to add my email address as well into the chat box, or you can connect with me on WeChat. So I'm going to give you my WeChat ID, and you can connect with me. I'll be your first network and ecosystem going into the Chinese market. So let's go ahead and start with some questions. I'm just going to open the questions box now and see what pops in. So Kim is asking, can a US company employ a Chinese national and pay this person as a consultant if we can find a way to pay this person in renminbi from overseas? Kim, no, you can't. Not legally. So you have several options there. One, the consultant sets up his own company. If the consultant sets up his own company, then he can invoice you for his services. He can issue that invoice in renminbi. He will have a corporate bank account where he will then receive the funds from you. If you don't want to do that method where he sets up his own company, then another method would be to use an intermediary to hire him. In that situation, you know exactly that he is properly employed, his social insurance is being paid for, and his income tax is also being declared. If you take the route of using your US company to transfer funds to him, be aware of the following. One, it's not legal. He will have leverage over you. Number two, every single bank account, individual person's bank account in China has only a threshold of 50,000 US dollar as a conversion. So if you pay, if you have a renminbi account in the US and you want to transfer renminbi to him, first of all, that doesn't work because you can't do corporate to individual for renminbi transfers. Renminbi transfers from overseas can only be corporate to corporate bank accounts. So you don't have a choice with an individual. It has to be a USD transfer, and he can only convert the equivalent of 50,000 US dollars in a calendar year. Okay, so be aware of that. I've added a little bit more detail than I did in the presentation, so I hope that helps. Oh, that's the only question that popped in. Anybody else have any other questions they want to highlight? I'm going to give you guys a few minutes, and you can, by all means, oh, here we go. Jiyoung has a question. In case a Chinese individual helps us with deals and connections, is it common for him to ask for a personal commission bypassing his company? No, it's not. That's not normal. So, okay, well, I have some questions then. Is the Chinese individual doing this in his free time, or is he doing it under his company's umbrella? If he's doing it under his free time, you need to be aware that he's actually doing something against his employment contract. So that's not great for him if he gets caught. In addition to that, how would you pay that personal commission? Where would you pay it to? As I highlighted it above, you can't send renminbi to a renminbi account, personal account. You can only send foreign currency. How would he declare that? It's not, first of all, it's not common, Jiyoung. It's not something I would necessarily recommend. But again, there are solutions that you can create around that. For example, does this Chinese individual have a bank account outside of China? I understand. So everybody is very much fixated on making sure that the deals happen and the deals go through. So we just have to figure out ways to make it as legal as possible that you are protected. Okay. So Jiyoung, that question might require a little bit more of a discussion with you to see how it can play out. So if you want to set up a session with me, please do. I'd be happy to talk about it with you. Mika was asking, is it possible to send USD to to your Hong Kong bank account and then convert it to renminbi and send it from Hong Kong to China. In China, nobody cares what you do outside of China. A Hong Kong bank account, no. Again, if it's a Hong Kong corporate bank account, renminbi can only be remitted from a corporate account to a corporate account overseas. Hong Kong is still considered overseas, so it can only be corporate to corporate. Cannot be individual to individual. Mika, you were asking, in your internet banking, it should be okay, right? Not necessarily. The bank you might be able to do it, and then the bank might send you a letter saying the transfer did not go through because it wasn't a corporate account. So be aware of that. I suggest you to contact your bank first, see how it would work. Guys, if you have any more questions, more than welcome to just type it in. Don't hesitate. I just want to highlight again, if you want to set up a session with me, happy to discuss with you. Alternatively, oh, sorry, I left out today's webinar. Don't forget, tomorrow we're going to be talking about representative offices. So if you guys are looking for a lower level of commitment in terms of entering China, rep offices might be interesting for you. And on Thursday, we're actually going to be talking about setting up a business in China and what it means, what are the criterias, etc. If you haven't registered for those, you can go to our website, woodburnglobal.com/events, and register there. I want to thank you all for joining today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you also for your questions. And again, if you want to set up a chat with me, please don't hesitate to do so. I look forward to seeing you later on in the week, and I'll talk to you again very soon. Take care and goodbye.